Hello, I'm Dr. Ryan Anderson. I'm one of the founders of Telos U. Today, I'm here to talk to you about a specific set of skills from the processing approach, specifically forecasting and front loading. One of the reasons I wanted to record this webinar is these two skills are so important and make such a big difference. I want to make sure that everyone who ever has any contact with Telos comes away completely familiar with these two tools and very, very confident in how to apply them, both in their lives outside of Telos, because this works with all kinds of populations, with young children, with spouses when there are disagreements, with people who are feeling emotionally overwhelmed. These are useful tools not only for people with information processing issues, but they are especially important tools when working with people who have information processing issues. So let's dive into it. So the purposes of the processing approach in general are to help work with some of the peculiarities that happen for people who have information processing issues. For example, a lot of times they struggle a little bit more with issues of rigidity. That can be emotional rigidity, that once they get into a certain way of feeling, it's very hard for them to shift out of it. It can also be cognitive rigidity, having a hard time seeing things in multiple ways. They kind of arrive at their first perception and have a hard time expanding it, shifting it, or adapting it. They can also experience stress sensitivity. Everyone has a level at which they've experienced too much stress and they get flooded and overloaded. People with information processing issues tend to have greater stress sensitivity and hit those emotional flooding points faster. There can be issues with perception and reasoning. There can be difficulty with social cues or people who seem to have a hard time just getting it about various issues and often seem to be miscalculating a variety of things in their lives. There's struggles with organization, social struggles, and also difficulty with changes and transitions. And the processing approach is going after what causes each one of these struggles rather than just trying to treat the symptoms themselves. Now, anytime we're working on applying the processing approach, it helps to understand the overarching principles that need to be a part of everything we do in applying the processing approach. First, we need to develop a realistic understanding and expectations of that person, both about who they are today, what their capacity is today, and what a realistic course of growth looks like for them. So rather than imagining them growing in ways that are unrealistic for them in leaps and bounds or neurotypical, that we're understanding what they are likely to experience, including the one step forward, one step back, skin, knees, bumps, and bruises that will be a part of that process, and also developing a realistic understanding of what the speed of that process is likely to appear to be. From there, we begin with assessing and enacting appropriate accommodations. Now, these accommodations need to not be so overwhelming that they remove that person's ability to do the things they are capable of. We need to help them still continue to do those things which they can do and not accommodate them into incapacity. But we do have to make sure that while we're working on accommodations, that we are working on things that are helping them have better experiences and reducing the stress and having more success than they're having on their own. And as we do this, it should help them reduce stress, which opens up emotional and neurological space for them to actually be able to grow. And it also helps establish a supportive relationship with us, which can serve as an anchor and a safe port for them as they work through the challenges that we're going to be facing together with them. And it also helps us to make sure we're providing appropriate scaffolding for them and helping them grow one step at a time, where they're much more likely to be successful. And after we've done those two pieces, we can then work with the student to build compensating skills and strategies. Now, keep in mind, this works much better when we've made progress in general emotional regulation and their ability to calm themselves down physically. So getting really good at RMPs and beginning to work on reframing and calming themselves down, because only when people are under a certain degree of physiological and emotional distress are they in a position to learn and apply new strategies? So in everything we're doing, we're thinking about these three major approaches and trying to make sure we're approaching them in that order. So as we're doing that, we can begin to apply and should be applying liberally throughout the various strategies of the processing approach. I want to talk a little bit specifically about why we forecast and why we front load. First of all, many of our students have issues with their working memory, whereas their working memory may be smaller than the average person, or it may be smaller relative to their verbal comprehension, their perceptual reasoning, or both. And therefore, their brain is taking in more information than they have room on their work desk, so to speak, to work with it. And so they tend to get overwhelmed, to shut down, to misinformation, to show they're not getting it, and all those other things that we tend to see. So when we're forecasting and front loading properly, what we're doing is helping them strategically load into their working memory things that will be useful for them for the circumstance they are about to enter. And along with that, also, not just here's what's going to be happening and helping them perceive it better, but loading into their working memory the tools and strategies and supports that they need to navigate that effectively. And this provides structure that helps guide their actions and help them be more successful in those circumstances. This also helps them to make their transitions and changes more predictable, and in some ways allows them to do some of that adaptation before they actually get into the circumstance. One of the most stressful things for people who are having information processing issues is finding that they have to suddenly adapt and change to something they didn't see coming. So when we can predict changes, they can kind of begin working on the changes ahead of time and therefore tend to be much better with those shifts and transitions. And this reduces the amount of stress they're experiencing by reducing the pace and the volume of novel information that's coming into their system. So let's define these two tools. In forecasting, it's very simply us helping the person know what's coming up in as concrete and clear way as possible. So what's going to happen? When is it going to happen? And why is it happening? It can also be helpful to talk about things like, hey, here's the time frame for transition. If we need to leave in an hour, then we're going to start packing up and getting ready to go in 20 minutes, which means in about five minutes before then, so 15 minutes from now, I'm going to need to ask you to begin shifting from what you're doing. So it's something as simple as that. So front loading is helping them understand what the circumstance is going to be, what the challenges are that they usually have in that circumstance, and what the approaches are that we're going to use to try to tackle those challenges. So it's not just, hey, we're going to be going to this place. It's in this place, these tend to be the difficulties and challenges that we have. So as a result, you're going to be trying this piece, and I'm going to be doing this thing to help you with it. And here's how we'll monitor it together. Here's how I'll follow up with you together. But this is what we're going to try to accomplish while we are there. So let's talk about a couple of examples. The first may be us getting ready to go on an activity. So the forecasting portion could look something like this. All right, we have an activity today. It's going to be this afternoon at 2 o'clock. And we're going to be going on a nature walk at the bird sanctuary near Utah Lake. So as a part of that activity, we're going to need to make sure we wear sunscreen and bug spray. What we're going to be doing is we'll be taking those with us in the van, and we'll put them on when we arrive there. But we're going to make sure that before any of us get moving, that all of us have sunscreen and bug spray. We also need to make sure that everyone brings a water bottle. So what I'm going to be doing is at about 1:50, so with 10 minutes before we leave, I'm going to go around and make sure that everyone has their water bottle filled up. And then from there, we check in to see their understanding, have them reflect back to us, see if they have any questions or concerns, and we can work through them then to avoid them suddenly running into their questions and concerns while we're trying to have them transition, which can lead to all kinds of crisis points for them. Now, that's the forecasting portion of the conversation. Once we've had that, we can then move into the next portion, which is front loading. So in van rides, as you know, lately we've been having some trouble with you and this other student getting into arguments. And what that typically looks like is the two of you are sitting towards the back. You'll start talking about something, you'll have a disagreement, it tends to blow up. So the plan that we've agreed upon as we've talked about this particular challenge is while we're in the van to have you sit up close to me near the front of the van while we have that other student sit in the back of the van. And that seems to help. Also, you and your therapist worked on that script about how you can respond without getting into an argument. As a reminder, this is what that script is. And so that's the part that you'll be doing. So I'll be right there to help. If you find yourself struggling, if you notice that you're feeling like you're getting pulled into an argument or things like that, I'll be there and I'll be ready to help and intervene. But these are the parts you're going to be doing. This is the part that I'm going to be doing. And our goal is to get through the van ride without you guys getting into an argument and therefore kind of being angry with each other through the whole activity that we're going to be doing. So that's forecasting and front loading right there. The second example has to do with something that a therapist might say to a student as they're getting ready to go into a family therapy session. So it might be during the individual session this week, prior to the family session, and then a recap of this with the student and the parents as we go into the family portion of the call. So the forecasting could look like this. So you have a home visit coming up in 4 weeks. And that's the reason we're already starting to make plans for that visit because we want to set it up to be a success and a good experience for you and for your parents. So as a part of that, we're trying to anticipate some of the challenges that you guys might encounter together and come up with strategies to overcome those challenges. So as a part of that, in family therapy, either later this week or in family therapy now as we're going into it, we're going to discuss how we want to approach the issue of you having access to technology while you're home on this home pass. Now, it's very possible that you and your parents don't necessarily start off on the same page and seeing things. You may have certain concerns, they may have different concerns, and those concerns may feel like they clash. So we're going to need to work together to come up with something that feels mutually agreeable and that is a good reflection of your current level of managing your own technology. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish today. So from there, we check for understanding, questions, and concerns. That's the forecasting piece. Here's the front loading piece. So when we talk about technology, in the past, it's been very easy for you to get angry as soon as your parents either disagree with you or have a concern about what you're asking about or what you're advocating for. And that usually leads to a blow up or a shutdown because you're upset and you're worried that you're just never going to have any access to technology. So our goal today is to be able to at least have the conversation without having a blow up. So to do that, I'm going to be helping you monitor whether you're in the green, the yellow, or the red. And I'm going to be doing the same thing for your parents because I know this can be a stressful conversation for them. Now, if you start to dip into the yellow, I would like you to use some of those self-soothing techniques that we've been working on, like X, Y, or Z. Do you remember those? Okay. So, and if we need to, we can get to the point where we take an RMP, take a break from the conversation, and come back to it. So that's the forecasting and front loading for that particular issue. So these may sound like relatively small and simple things to do, but something that we have learned is that by doing these consistently, we avoid a lot of problems. We help things go right, and we chart a course through the challenges that is much more likely to get to a good and positive outcome. So when should you forecast and front load and how? Well, as frequently as possible. It's a little bit hard to overdo, frankly. But certainly we want to keep in mind, as soon as we can see that something's going to change from the way that we anticipated it was going to go, we're going to want to forecast that for the student with as much notice as possible. You can't always predict things, but when you can see that something's shifting, letting them know early in the process is helpful. We should do this whenever we enter situations that we know tend to be challenging for that particular student. Also, if we're entering situations where there are positive opportunities that sometimes tend to get missed, we'll want to forecast and front load to help put this on their radar to see if we can take advantage of the positive opportunity. We should always approach forecasting and front loading with patience and with compassion, recognizing that we're helping people develop new skills and new things, and this will be uncomfortable and awkward, and they won't be very good at it in the beginning. So we need to be very patient, very kind, and willing to walk through that path with them. And all along the way, we should make sure we have that arm around the shoulder attitude. My hope is that if we're doing this right, Telos is filled with forecasting and front loading, that we see it all the time, and that parents become very familiar with it and are using it frequently with their students. And what we have found through our own research is that when these are constants, our students' growth is paved and moves forward much more smoothly and at a better pace. So I hope that you'll continue to review this with your teams, with your therapists, and that you will work on practicing this in everything you do, in the work that you do with our students here.